Exploring theology, doctrine, and all of the fascinating subjects in between, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, Dead Men Walking starts
now.
Oh, well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dead Men Walking podcast. I'm your host, Greg. Jason cannot be with us today, but he's with us in spirit. Thank you so much for visiting dmwpodcast.com, where you can find out more about the show. Visit our snarky merch site and maybe support the show. We thank you for coming along and the constructive criticism that we get. Some of it constructive, some of it just criticism, but either way, we absolutely love it. So let's get right into it, because usually I'll talk a little bit, say a few things, but I want to get right into it because we have a guest, and I know I say this every week. We're excited about our guests, but this one really is because we've talked about him for a long time, 2.5 years on the podcast, and he's finally here. I don't have a written out bio because I can't, or I don't even have a bio because I can't even remember all the things that this gentleman has done. So he's going to introduce himself. How about that? Probably our favorite guest so far on the podcast, and I don't even rightly introduce him. It's Dr. James White. How are you, sir?
You can't call me your favorite guest when you've had Doug Wilson on, first of all, and I haven't said anything yet. So I could fall asleep. I could start speaking in tongues and completely destroy your theology. I mean, there's just all sorts of stuff that could happen. You never know.
Well, I say favorite because you're one of those that have touched and marked my life, as well as my co-host who isn't here, through your books, through your debates. So it's just one of those things to where whether I speak to you or not, know that the Lord has used you in my life, and I absolutely love it. I will tell my story to you very quickly after you give us a bio, or before you give us a bio here. I was raised in a very fundamentalist church for the first 7 or 8 years of my life, and then between 7 and 16, very, very Bethel Pentecostal. So I got two extremes, ran from the Lord. And at 22 years old, the Lord absolutely saved me. I said the sinner's prayer at 7. I was saved at 23, started to read and get into the Bible, and got hooked on this newsletter. It was a physical newsletter coming to my house from a gentleman named Dave Hunt of the Berean Call. And I went, oh, this guy really argues logic, and he seems to know what he's talking about. And I'm wrestling with some of the traditions I was taught growing up, and it seems like he explained them. Well, about a year into this, in his newsletter, he says, hey, you guys need to go check out this new book that I did with this guy named James White. It's called Debating Calvinism. And I said, oh, I don't know who this James White guy is, but Dave is going to wipe the floor with this guy. I was so happy to get this book. I go, I'm going to read through this and go, Dave. And about halfway through it, I went, wait a minute, this James White fella's making a biblical argument, the same things I've been wrestling with. And from there, I tell people I was a closeted Calvinist for about 8 years. About 8 years. Well, I didn't want to admit it. Because I grew up saying, those people are kind of strange. They're weird. They have some things about election and the sovereignty of God, and took a long time to unwrap those traditions. But by far, Potter's Freedom, Debating Calvinism. I mean, your debates online. I remember in my mid-20s just staying up till 2:00 in the morning, watching those debates, learning, soaking it up. Obviously, it was all based on the Word of God and studying that, but you aiding in that was huge. So what an honor it is to have you here. And officially, I think, my favorite guest.
Well, it's funny. When I had Dave on, I actually interviewed him on a local radio station. He calls it a debate. It wasn't a debate. I was interviewing him I was taking Marty Minto's place, actually. And that's where the James, I have no traditions thing took place and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I had friends tell me when the book idea came up, Debating Calvinism, they said, if you do that, he'll never debate you. Because even when the book came out, I think that was Multnomah, if I recall correctly, because that was his publisher. They tried to, when you have a book come out, they do publicity and stuff like that. And like when Letters to a Mormon Elder came out, Bethany House had me on just all sorts of radio programs and stuff like that. Yeah. Anyway, Dave would not do any programs with me. And the one exception, however it had been arranged, they hadn't told him I was going to be on, and he was angry that I was on the air with him. So it was, I had been told the truth. If I did the book, he would never, ever, ever interact with me. He never, ever did. I could tell you a really fun story about meeting Dave at the studios at the offices of Grace to You a few years later, but I probably shouldn't go into that right now. It's not really our topic. But anyway, I'm glad those books were helpful to you. I'm not sure how you're a closeted Calvinist for 8 years. You'd have to be really, really careful about that. But I'm glad.
Well, I didn't come out and say it openly, but I believed those things. I knew they were biblical, and it was honestly studying between you and R.C. Sproul and in his writings were probably the two most impactful of unpacking those big weighty subjects in a way that a meathead like I can understand. So I do appreciate that, and I'm sure you've been told that many times. So we won't linger on that too much. I will say in that book, though, he didn't. In most debates that you have, and we'll get into this a little bit, they don't really ever refute the exact point you're making, or it just, they gloss over. Here, I need to ask you this, refute this, or what do you mean by that? And it was a lot of that in that book, which I was very disappointed in, but we're not going to dwell on something that's, whatever, 20 years old now almost. At the top of the hour, we always do some Newsy news. Would you like to do a little Newsy news with us?
Up to you.
All right, here we go. Let's go. Here we go.
News, the news, the newsy news, the news, the news, the news, and news. We got some news.
Oh, yes, our Tom Askell approved Newsy news. You should have seen the face he gave us when we played that for him, but we like to take learned men and bring them down to our level is what we like to do. So right out of the headlines here, Governor Abbott dropped off illegal immigrants in front of the VP's house the last couple days. This seems to be something that DeSantis and Governor Abbott are doing. What do you think, Dr. White? Is this something that we should be doing? Should we be taking the illegal immigrants and saying, hey, your policies started this? Here, deal with them. Is it the Christian thing to do?
Well, the problem is constitutionally, the regime has abandoned its responsibilities. You talk about impeachable offenses, refusing to close the border, allowing millions of invaders into the country. And that's what it is. I'm sorry, this isn't about justice. It's about the definition of a nation. And so, yeah, if they're going to install these policies that are basically going to be flooding my state, Texas, New Mexico, California, with people we don't know where they came from. We have no way of tracking them, and yet they're filling our. I can't even do my long distance bike rides anymore from my house because it's no longer safe. I used to be able to ride at the Arizona Canal for like 70 miles without any problems. All the underpasses are now filled with homeless people, drug addicts, needles everywhere. My entire city has been completely transformed in 5 years. And so that's a clear violation of the law that they swore to uphold. So, hey, whatever. My understanding is those people have to agree to go to those places, and they want to go to those places. So fine.
Sure.
Let them go.
I think the biggest issue here is you have those air quotes compassionate liberals that are needing to put their money where their mouth is in those policies, and they don't seem to like it when they have to follow through on their utopian plans. That's kind of what I get from that. Second story, very quickly. Trump's tax returns are going to be released out of the House. I think this week sometime. Not just Trump, but any politician. Should they be required to show their private tax returns? Democrat, Republican, who cares what it is? What's your stance on that? Do you think we should people have to see my tax returns as a locally elected official?
I don't know. This only seems to go one direction. I don't expect to see Nancy Pelosi's tax returns or anybody else like that. So it would be nice if we actually enforced laws concerning influence peddling and things like that. But we're so far past all that anymore. It's so obvious to me that China owns most of the people in charge of our country anyways, that, this $1.7 trillion thing that got illegally, unconstitutionally passed without a quorum in the House just a few days ago, and nobody cares. It's just sort of like, whatever. You and I both know that that's never going to be paid off. And, that means default's coming. And when default comes, oh my goodness, a slice of bread's gonna cost you $25. So I don't know. We just, you sort of wonder with the stuff that came out about the JFK assassination and everything
No
else.
one cares. Yeah.
You just sit back and go, is anything the way I actually thought it was? And of course, I'm a bit older than you are, so I go back to a time when you really did trust the United States government, and probably didn't have any reason to do so back then either. So I don't know.
Yeah, on a personal note, even me at 41, I feel like I've just seen the same cycle of even with government or even in culture, and you just start to see these patterns of how do I say it? Of evilness, and then progression, and then you can almost predict and go, okay, I can see what's coming just because of what I've lived through. And unfortunately, in this country, we're in such a youth culture. We don't honor those who have the most valuable thing under their belt, the most of it, which is time. We toss older people and elders to the side and say your ideas aren't important. We're a youth culture. Do you see that as well? Just you've lived through a certain amount, and you go, geez, I can almost predict what's going to happen and how this is going to go.
Well, let's be honest. The elderly people in politics, they, you look at all the clips of Biden saying the exact opposite of what he says now. So sure. It's not that there's wisdom there. It's that these people just float with the wind. They do whatever the culture wants them to do. And the problem today is how many older people don't stick with their convictions. I mean, look at the polls on gay marriage, for example. It's astonishing. They say 73% or something like that of American citizens today think this is fine and wonderful. And when you really start talking with somebody about it, it's all pure emotion. And it's the same with everybody. It's one thing for the kids to be pure emotion, but you would think that people my age would recognize that there are important things that can't, you move that stone, the whole place falls over. And no one, again, seems to care too much about that right now.
Yeah. All right. Last one. As a real estate broker, this interested me. It said record numbers of Christians or self-identifying Christians moving from liberal states to conservative ones, almost 30% more in the last 5 years than year over year before that. How do we feel about that? Should we just go hole up in a conservative state and kind of build a little kingdom there? Or should we be in the cities and be in the democratic states and try to change within? I know there's a big debate even within Christianity in general. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I live in one of the most corrupt counties in America, Maricopa County, where I can guarantee my vote's worthless. Where we know, I knew in 2020 what had happened here. There wasn't any question about what had happened here in 2020. And now it's happened again right in front of our eyes. Everybody was watching it, and they still pulled it off.
Yeah.
So part of me goes, this state's going blue. It's sort of purple right now, but it's going blue. And I don't even drive, and I don't even go to California anymore. So have I thought about where I need to go? Yeah, I have. Yeah. Do I want to do that? Gracious sakes, no. But I don't know. Will it get to a point where the tyranny is just too strong to survive? Yeah. And it could definitely get to that point. The governor we've got coming in, I know she's not the valid governor. She didn't really win, but she's a vacuous, cowardly, whatever I'm told to do by the higher powers type of person. And so they're going to be locking us down the next time there's anything that even looks like a sniffle out there. Like, I don't know what. So I don't know. It's these are all questions that we're all struggling with. There's no two ways about it.
Well, thank God we still have that personal liberty as guaranteed in the Constitution to the freedom of travel. We saw that taken away for a little bit in 2020. But people vote with their feet. Here in Michigan, where we're from, we lost 2 congressional seats. People took off to Texas and Florida because of what our governor did here. So absolutely, those things have consequences. I would say on a side note, as we round out Newsy News, I do personally appreciate you over the last probably 3 to 4 years, seeing you being much more vocal on not only theological issues, we know, and doctrinal issues and debate issues, but even on political and policy issues. I think that's with someone like you who has such a large following and people who respect your opinion, to see you talk about those things, because unfortunately, policy is intertwined a lot with not only citizens, but people who are Christians here in the country. So appreciate that.
Well, I certainly, we've seen a major change. With the nation has changed so much over just the past 10 years, and much of that change has been directly related to the shift in worldview and the abandonment of the impetus, the momentum of a Christian consensus into a secular consensus. And so we can't avoid those things. I was raised certainly in the context where you never talked politics in the pulpit. You never addressed that kind of stuff. That was way too controversial to do anything like that. But besides, back then, the difference between a Republican and a Democrat was not, well, today it's about back to the same thing. I'm not sure as much of a difference either, but but for different reasons. And there was still such a consensus in regards to what was foundationally required for a president or something like that. But now so much, I mean, look, we're dealing with, and this is sort of what our topic is anyways.
Let's go into it.
We're dealing with the Senate putting into law only a few weeks ago the direct repudiation of the foundational view of man and woman that had given any meaning to our legal system to begin with. This was more than a Obergefell. We all know it's more than a Obergefell. This is going to be the foundation for silencing Christian schools and Christian education and going after churches and everything else. And everybody who doesn't see that, just I don't know what they're doing with their time, but they're not using it to think. That's exactly what it was all about. And so the pressures that are coming against my grandchildren, okay, my oldest granddaughter is just turned 13. So, we've got a teenager now, scary. And she's going to be facing societal, educational, employment pressures that I certainly didn't have as a kid. Her parents didn't have as a kid. To where they're going to have to be making decisions and being willing to sacrifice tremendously as far as ability to earn money, where they can live, what they can do, based upon whether they're going to stand firm on their convictions or whether they're not. Yeah. And so the time for calling that kind of stuff too controversial is long past. It is now staring us in the face. And therefore, these are theological issues. I think certainly over the past couple of years, it is interesting. I moved to Apologia Church in 2018. And anybody that knows Apologia knows that that's the home of End Abortion Now. Yep. Jeff Durbin has been very, very well known for his bold stands for quite some time. And so that was probably part of my evolution there as well. But there's also, in that context, an eschatological foundation for looking to the future, which was not something I was raised with. I was raised with a very, very strong, you don't worry about the future. There is almost never any discussion of my having grandchildren or great-grandchildren or anything like that at all. That was just not a part of what you thought about. And so that has changed a lot of things, to be thinking forwardly, to be thinking building now, even in the midst of tremendous opposition, and in essence, communicating forward the faith to future generations and giving them that foundation to stand against the tremendous pressures that they're going to be facing. That changes everything as well. And I wish there's a lot of things I look back on and go, man, I would have had more kids if I had been at a place like Apologia, rather than raised the way that I was. I sit back, and somehow my mom especially communicated to me that once you had a boy and a girl, you were done. That was it. I don't know where that came from, but when you hear it over and over and over again in your youth, it just becomes a part of, and the churches we are in never addressed issues like that at all. And so that's what we had. And now I wish I had done things differently. But thankfully, I was just watching a video of one of our families in our church, and Apology is known for having lots of kids. I don't know what the average number is. It's at least 5. We have at least 2 or 3 families with 10. And I was watching those kids performing. They did a Christmas thing on 4 different pianos together, and they're doing the 12 days of Christmas. And I'm just watching these kids, and they're just fantastic. So at least I can sort of enjoy that, in that context. And I've got 5 grandkids, so we'll be able to do something fun with 5 eventually too. So, but yeah, it does change how you approach everything in society. And I'm not one of those people. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if there's going to be a great revival. I don't know if it is God's intention to just make Western culture a memorial for the rest of time for what happens when you abandon the gifts of God that he's given to you in the goodness of his law. Maybe we're just going to have to be leveled to the ground for the people who come after to go, that's what happens. We'll never do it again.
Right.
Secularism brings this. Look at the madness they had. Oh my goodness. The video that popped up yesterday on Twitter of some dude pretending to have cramps.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
This is
not even physically possible, but yes. Yeah.
I don't even know what to say, but I can certainly see how 70 years from now, that's in a museum someplace.
Yeah.
As one of the clearest examples of the utter insanity that infected Western culture, because Western culture had the light and said, we hate the light, and we're going to bury it under the largest amount of insanity and rebellion we can possibly come up with.
Do you feel, this is kind of off subject, but you brought this up, and so many questions I could ask here, but I'm just curious. Do you feel, because I was brought up this way in the 80s in church, the overwhelming popularity of this kind of rapture hatch pre-mill eschatology that really invaded in the 70s, 80s, and through the 90s of, hey man, let's just hunker down and he'll take us out of here. Is that a little bit to blame of where we are now too? Look, we know man is depraved. We know they seek their own pleasures, but I feel like the church really missed, me growing up, it was more important not to listen to, Queen or AC/DC than it was to actually go and preach the gospel to people. So right. It's like this, because, hey, Jesus is coming anytime and we're up and out of here. Leave these fools behind, Well, when in fact,
I would definitely agree on the AC/DC part, but
right.
But when I was a kid, it was don't listen to John Denver, if you can believe that. But no, eschatology is a part of theology as a whole, and it very often reflects how we view the church's purpose in the world. And so I was raised very strongly dispensational, premillennial, and some of my earliest memories are of books about the fig tree in Matthew 24. And so that's 1948, and that's the nation of Israel. And so
Sure.
you've only got 40 years from 1948. And so I remember we came out of our Southern Baptist church one time, and somebody had hit the parking lot and had put these booklets on every windshield. 88 reasons why the rapture is going to be in 1988. And
has a nice ring to it.
Well, it was
convenient.
Yeah. And I couldn't argue with it too much because I remember in 1980 being at a lock-in late at night at our church. And back then I had a tritium watch. I don't know if you've ever seen a tritium watch, but
yes.
And they glow all the time.
Yeah.
And once your eyes are accustomed to the dark, they're very bright.
Yeah.
And I was literally using it to read the page. It was that bright in my little handheld. I couldn't even read it today. New Testament. And I was explaining to the guys in my group in this lock-in about the fig tree and 40 years. So 1988, I mean, that was 8 years in the future.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's all the time we've got, guys, and that's going to impact a lot about how you think and how you act. And did that encourage some people to be zealously evangelical? Well, I suppose in a sense, but I'm not sure exactly. The fire escape mentality does not lend itself to the creation of particularly strong churches. And it is interesting. That church had 20,000 members.
Wow.
We can never find more than 7,000 at a time. And when the pastor of that church left, the next guy that came in was brutally honest and said, look, for years, we've had a larger back door than a front door. We've had more people leaving than we were bringing in, which is why the church was shrinking, which means there was no discipleship. There was no, it was get him in, dunk him, and then, after that, whatever. And, those type of people are sometimes the hardest type of people to actually win because they're religiously abused. They already think they're right with God to begin with. So anyway, I think it was a part of it, but I think that the greater aspect of it was that we didn't really have the idea that God was about his own self-glorification in all of creation, that all of what's taking place in time is going to be seen as a part of that great tapestry of God's self-glorification. And we can only see a very dim amount of that.
Yeah.
But it would have been great if somebody back then had done the two things that Doug Wilson did for me recently. And that is to say, why don't Christians ever talk about their great grandchildren? And I had to think about that. And it's like, yeah, we don't. And then his other question was, how do you know we're not still in the early church?
Right.
Which was interesting because, I've been teaching church history since 1990, not continuously, but, and I knew intellectually that every generation viewed itself as being the last generation.
Sure.
And I knew where that came from the New Testament. I get an expectancy type of an idea. Some of that was because of, I think, a misunderstanding of Matthew chapter 24. But hey, you can go too far the other direction too.
Yep.
And so I just wish that there had been more. I wish I had read a little bit more broadly. But look, when you're raised in a fundamentalist context, you don't think there's any wisdom to be found outside of the people that look like you and dress like you anyways.
Yeah.
That was how we understood it.
No, I was raised the same way, like I said, for the first 10 years of my life. So it sounds like you're saying you would be a proponent of Christians engaging culture. You have yourself, obviously, running for local offices, creating art, creating movies and books and all these things, which I feel is lacking a little bit, even within the broader evangelical Christian church, which what does even evangelical mean anymore? I don't know.
Right.
Ligonier did a 20,000 person poll, and 65% of people who identified as Christians didn't believe that Christ was deity or didn't believe in the Trinity. So I don't even know what Christian means anymore in America. But so you're okay with building a Christ, I don't want to say Christ culture, but building the kingdom or glorifying God in those things, art and public square and business and things like that. We're not one of those that should just hunker down inside the church and maybe once in a while go out and help the poor and say some nice things on the corner square if we need to.
Right. It could be very, very frustrating right now to be seeking to do that if, in fact, we're on the cusp of a period of deep darkness and judgment that then will be used. I mean, this has been my argument. It seems to me secularism is the greatest enemy of the cross of Christ that has ever arisen. Even paganism had some type of theistic concept to it. But secularism is the rebellious insanity that not only is there no God, but there is no purpose, there is no reason. Man is the ultimate authority, but there really isn't any authority other than that which we create for ourselves, because once you die, there's no meaning, there's no purpose, there's no judgment, there's no nothing. And it's pure futility. And it means that everything that Christ said and did was a lie and is empty and worthless, and the tomb is still full. We just haven't found the right one. So secularism is the culture of death in its fullest flourishing and formation. And so if every enemy needs to be put under Christ's feet, the only way for this enemy to be put under Christ's feet is in a pretty spectacular fashion. And I can't see that happening with a whimper. And I can't see that happening in slow motion. Because as I look at the type of tyrannical secularism, the totalitarianism that is clearly all around us. I mean,
yeah,
you're not very far from Canada, and shockingly, having hockey as your favorite sport and eating a lot of syrup does not keep you from falling into really radical political orientations. And
I think those are the two main causes. Liking hockey, eating copious amounts of sugar.
It could be. But yeah, you're right there. And so you see that kind of insanity. And now you can't get your lift chair fast enough. How about just committing suicide? Okay. Wow. When you see all this happening around us, that's not something that just slowly fades away. These people are tyrants. They are totalitarians. They hate the idea of anybody having any kind of perspective other than their own. And look, Christians need to be up front. We believe that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess.
Amen.
But that is totally different than human beings enforcing their destructive poison upon the minds of everybody around them. And if you will not believe like me, we'll either silence you, we'll put you in jail, or we'll shoot you, or we'll do whatever else we need to do to you. It seems to me like there has been a withdrawing of the hand of restraint on God's part.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, going back to the point, I encourage my grandchildren to seek to do beautiful things, but also to recognize that there may be a period of time where the only thing it's going to be beautiful we're going to be able to do is survive together and love together and encourage one another in standing against horrific persecution, because it wouldn't be the first time in history. There have been some super, 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 super dark times in history. I've often said that Jerry Jenkins and Tim LaHaye missed their best time in history, because if they had been alive in 1347, they would have sold a whole lot more books than they did, because that's when the Black Plague started, and it would be really easy to convince everybody this is it.
Right.
It's all over with right now. But there was still a lot of stuff to come after that. So we've been through darkness before. It may be a really, really deep darkness again.
Yeah.
But we have to keep our eyes on, what glorifies God and how do we do that in the context and the time in which we live right now.
Yeah. So we have the secularism that, like you just said, probably the greatest threat. So where do we stand as Christians when we're partnering with someone in a cause that might align biblically, but they don't have a biblical worldview? I've really been thinking about this a lot lately. The Ben Shapiro's, the Dennis Prager's, Jewish. They have some type of theistic view, but then, you do see them celebrating Dave Rubin's marriage with his son. And you go, well, they don't, I mean, they still have a pagan worldview when it comes down to it. Do I still stand shoulder to shoulder with them on abortion or limited government or, bringing back authoritarianism or reining it in? I mean, and things like that. How do we discern that as believers with a biblical worldview? What do you think?
Well, yeah, that's really hard because the stuff with Dave Rubin certainly did give us the opportunity. And the fellow up in Moscow that did the review of Peterson's interview of Rubin, the name escapes me, unfortunately. I listened to it twice. It was very, very good. I think he's one of the elders up in Moscow. Just did a wonderful, wonderful job in taking apart that interview. And so what you have to do is when we are standing shoulder to shoulder, we are still talking to even those people about their need for repentance. And now they will say, okay, that means we're not going to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder. Well, if that's what they say, fine. But the reason I protect unborn life is the same reason that I cannot possibly call Dave Rubin a married man. You can't have two husbands. You can't have two wives. That's a fundamental abandonment of what these things mean. And so you have to call out the contradiction and the inconsistency. And right now there is a lot of pressure on a lot of people to go, no. We just need the biggest group we can. Well, the only way we're going to get a big enough group that's going to be consistent on these issues is if there is a major, major, major work of the Spirit of God that converts a majority of the people in our culture. And I can see that happening, but it would seem much more likely to me that there's going to be a major transformation of this culture on a cataclysmic scale before there's going to be a rebuilding and a reestablishment of any kind of foundation that would reflect God's purposes in this world. Because we are very, very obviously intent upon being embarrassed about all the evidence of a Christian consensus in this nation's history. We're embarrassed by it. That's called racism now, and white fragility and whatever other insanity people come up with. And I think as long as we continue to have all sorts of cool, neat, fun stuff to distract ourselves, that's not going to happen. Now, the other side wants to make sure we don't get all that stuff. The other side wants us literally living in boxes, eating bugs. About only half of us. That's their. It's a little bit. I've sometimes wondered, honestly, about film and movies.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you see things and go, wait a minute, that's what's happening. And that was 30 years ago. And how did they know this was going to happen? It's we've all talked about 1984, but that was general trends.
Yeah. Lot of specific stuff in 84 though, that you look back on and you go, how did he, well, I mean, I think he was a partner with the CIA and stuff too. So he might've had some insight there, but you're absolutely right. You look at it and you go,
it's scary.
Who tipped them off? Is this a broader agenda?
Well, there was that thing that, I never watched the X-Files, but it hit the social media a couple weeks ago. This whole segment from an X-Files thing talking about genetic manipulation and vaccines and stuff like that. And you're going, this aired when? What?
Yeah, 30 years
It's
ago.
almost disorienting to think about. And then there was the movie with Matt Damon where all the rich people, all the powerful people lived up on a space station, basically. That was
Oh
really,
yeah. Yep.
remember that?
Yep.
And everybody else left on Earth is just, eating bugs and living in boxes. And it's like, that seems to be exactly what they want to do. That's
Yeah, but
strange.
I think we kind of understand, and we might know that men's hearts are depraved. They're sinful. They want power. They want self-interest, and that always comes to a tip, of the same thing of I want, I need, I get, you don't. It's selfish, pride, and everything else.
Yeah,
So
that's what we're facing. That's what we're facing. So unless something major happens, the culture of death will consume itself. That's one of my hopes, by the way, is these people will turn on each other. Right now,
can
they're
it last?
seeing power, they're grasping power, they're getting power, and so they're cooperating together. But the fact of the matter is, they will turn on each other. And
their ideology, they have to. Intersectionality, they have to turn on each other. They're always one-upping.
But that's why I do not want to be the supervillain right now. We all know who the supervillain is. He even dresses as a supervillain. He has the accent of a supervillain. Yeah. It is just astonishing. It's just like, what is this? But I wouldn't want to be him because he's got a huge target on his back from his own friends.
I said 2 years ago on this podcast that Elon Musk's time, I'm assuming that's who you're talking about. That
No. I'm talking about Klaus Schwab.
Oh, well, him too.
Oh, Klaus Schwab's the one that dresses like I mean, how can you not have the accent of the supervillain and you wear the very clothes of the supervillain? I am the supervillain. I am training all my little minions to take over all of the countries of the world.
He comes out and
said it publicly. It's amazing.
Well, that's what I mean. He's so forthright with it, and no one cares.
Yeah.
Because what we want to do, we want to starve this part of the world.
Yeah, but he's got a target on his back. His people will turn on him eventually. They will. They will. Just watch.
Yeah.
All right. Xi Jinping, same thing. Look out, buddy. You may have all the power right now, but most dictators don't live to really old ages.
I thought you were talking about Elon Musk and how they've turned on him because 2 years ago he was the darling of the left, and now he can't do anything right either because he says a few things that don't exactly line up. So that's another example of them eating their own as well. All right, let's finish this segment out with one last question here. What do you see currently as the biggest threat? And we kind of covered it a little bit, but the biggest threat to the American church right now? Is it social? Is it legislative? Is it ideological? What is
you're
it?
using the term American church evidently as the true American church. So much of the struggle that we have is how much false Christianity there is, how much fake Christianity there is. The world knows fake Christianity, but they utilize it. I mean, in the passing of the Senate, the Profaning of Marriage Act, the other side used a lot of references to how many churches and how many denominations were in support of this profaning of marriage. And so that's been a reality for a long time, but it's only growing in its the tsunami of apostasy that I've been talking about for years is really a tsunami, and there is a lot of it. And I think we're going to see a lot of people that we thought were conservative, we thought were solid, moving that direction. So you have the internal issues there. Externally, there is zero question that all financial advantages that have accrued to the church by being in a quote unquote Christian nation, those are going to be done with. I think that mega churches, mega seminaries, they're all in deep trouble. If you have lots of money, lots of property, you're just a huge target. These hate crimes laws will be used to absolutely force compliance on issues relating to the gay agenda and everything else. And so you're gonna see almost all churches above a certain small number of people having to split up into smaller units, because that's what you see in China.
Yeah.
The only mega churches in China are state controlled, and they're not really churches. True churches are small. There may be many of them, but they have to meet, in secret. And even
Sure.
that's next to impossible to do.
Yeah.
You have to have your phone with you at all times. You're always being tracked. I've said many times, the government already knows everybody that attends my church without having to have access to any membership roll. You just do it with, if you saw 2,000 mules, then you know how they can do this. They track your phone.
Sure.
And when you go to the same building on Sunday every week, they can put all that together and figure out everybody that does it. It's simple to do. You don't even have to have satellites and drones and stuff like that. We carry our own little, here's my tag. This is how I'm being listened to right now, probably. So that's going to be a huge, huge challenge, because we can't just look back at what people did under the Soviet Union and stuff like that. The technology has changed too much. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of external pressure that's put upon us. Again, up to a certain point, and only the Lord knows what that is. Will we see solid, sound Christianity just exploding in other places as a result? I've been to Zambia, and Zambia is a constitutionally Christian nation. And will we see a purification of churches in places like that? Because there's a lot of really bad theology in South America and Africa. You see these Nigerian prophets running around making lots of money off of the people there. Will we see a strengthening of those churches and a shifting of the focus, so that missionaries are now being sent into the devastated Western nations that are recovering from the last revolution? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
the Lord always has a remnant.
Yep.
If we were taught anything recently even through COVID, what a way to separate those who play Christian and those who love Christ and want to glorify God. It really was a good separation of that. All right. As we end this out and we put bookends on this episode, let's stick around with Dr. James White. He's going to play Fresh 10. It's where we ask 10 fresh questions. He doesn't know what they are. There might be a little personal. We're going to try to get to know him a little bit more, so this will be a little more lighthearted. Are you ready for Fresh 10?
Probably not.
Well, here it comes anyway.
Yo, can we kick that one more time? Let's go. I'm fresh. I'm fresh.
All right, here we go. Fresh 10 with Dr. James
White.
Look
at the time. Wow, look at the time. Yeah. Hey,
I got to go. Number one, and this is only because we
What's
have
that, Rich? What, Rich? What's that? Oh, we need the studio. Oh, okay.
I lost you. Your camera went out. This is mostly because we have a warp core behind you. Favorite Star Trek character, if you have one, and why?
That would depend on the series, honestly.
Okay.
Because I watched the original when it was airing for the first time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, I'm that old. So it really depends on the on that, and yeah, it's really hard to say. I would have to say I still have a real thing for Spock.
Yeah.
When he did a little too much LDS, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, number two, and I'm glad you touched on this earlier in the episode. Would you rather go back in time and visit your great-great-great-grandfather, or go ahead in the future and visit your great-great-great-grandkids? Which one are we doing? We're in the flux capacitor. The flux capacitor is fluxing. We get up to 88 miles an hour. We go in the time machine. What are we doing? Back or forward?
Yeah, see, I don't ponder things like this very much. So I I guess I'd want to go. I know a fair amount about those in the past and where I'd end
Okay.
up having to go. And I know we were always dirt poor. So I know a fair amount about them. So I guess I'd go see the great grandkids and see how the period of darkness went. Maybe.
Very post-mill of you. I like it. What, okay, here we go. What property do you go for in Monopoly? When you're playing Monopoly, what are we going for? The cheap
I
stuff, the expensive
I
stuff?
haven't played Monopoly in 30 years. I don't remember any of them, so I couldn't tell you.
All right. Question
Sorry.
4. Where do you most want to take your camper or RV,
Oh,
excuse me?
oh, well,
What's the number one place that you haven't taken it yet that you want to take it?
oh, I don't have any place that right now. I mean, the camper is so that I can go and speak places and do debates. So I was up late last night booking reservations for February, where I'm going to be doing 2 debates on a trip. Houston, I'm going to be debating a fully deconstructed progressivist on marriage. And then I'm going to be debating a King James only guy. I've got it going to Salt Lake City to debate. Jeff and I are debating 2 agnostics on can you have morality without God, April 1st. And then I've got a debate. I've got another debate somewhere along the way in the spring as well. So I've got a bunch of debates coming up. So the RV is my home away from home to let me do ministry. So
you want to go wherever the debate is, Awesome.
Yeah,
well, look at this. Question 5, Providence of the Lord. What's the closest debate you've ever had? Now we know you're 255-0 or whatever that number is.
No.
I'm
at 170. I'm at 178.
Okay, 178. No. All right. So what's that one that was close though that you went, maybe I should have been more prepared, or wow, he was really prepared and made you think and went, that was pretty close. You have one?
There was an attorney I debated on Arminianism that I had never heard before.
Okay.
And I didn't like doing debates with people I'd never heard where they would be coming from. So I really wasn't able to make my presentation specific to his position because I didn't know where he was going to be coming from. So I don't ever like doing debates with people that they've never recorded something or they've never written something. Because then it's always they know where I'm coming from, but I don't know where they're coming from. So you've got that. Most of the debates where there was any kind of ambiguity, it was because of misbehavior on the other side, to be honest with you.
Right.
But okay. Yeah.
All right. Question number 6, moving right along quickly. Dead or alive theologian or scholar you'd most like to have coffee with? Not debate. We just want to have coffee. You're friends.
Well, I don't like coffee, but
tea.
Wow. Well, I know a bunch of people who knew Van Til, but of course I never had the opportunity of meeting him. So probably Van Til.
Oh, good answer. Question number 7, a book outside of the Bible that everyone should at least pick up, peruse through, read at least once in their life. It can be one of your own if you want.
No. I don't know. The Holiness of God by Sproul is I think really classic. Obviously the Institutes to me is one of the best summaries of Christian theology ever written. So that's one that's high on the list.
All right. Question number 8, something most people assume about you that is not true.
Oh, most people are stunned that I have a regular life and that when they ask Summer, they say, what was it like growing up as the daughter of James White? She stuns them by going, hilarious. And they're like, hilarious? He says, oh yeah, we had a lot of fun. We used to play laser wars and we'd be crawling around in the dark, shooting lasers at each other. And all sorts of stories about going on missions trips with me in various places and getting into all sorts of trouble. And so, people think I just debate all the time and stuff like that. And unlike Jerry Matitix, who does debate all the time, when I'm out of the debate, I'm not debating anymore. So,
right. All right. So, what's your go-to meal? What's your favorite meal? You just one that you go to and you always like. Can't get enough of it.
Chicken quesadilla and chips and salsa at Cafe Rio.
Oh, that was the easiest one on the whole list so far.
Oh yeah,
All right.
yeah. I mean, that's well, I've got a little Italian place up the road that I eat at probably 3-4 times a week, and I get a kid's spaghetti and meat sauce, 2 meatballs, and a piece of garlic bread.
Yeah.
I do not have a wide variety of foods. So once I find stuff I like, I stick with it, and then they stop making it.
Right. All right. Last one. So we had so many people on here excited that you were coming on. They couldn't wait for the conversation. We obviously revere you. We love your body of work, the man of God that you are. But they said, I had someone reach out and say, have him tell at least one embarrassing thing that's happened to him, so we know that he is actually human.
Let's see that anybody who listens to me on the dividing line knows that I'm really, really human. And that's just not even an issue. Oh man, I don't know how to answer that one. I mean, when I think back on, well, the only thing I've ever given as an answer to that was when I was a senior in high school. I went to interview a guy at the Arizona Fish and Game Department. I was doing I was a biology guy, both in high school and I majored in biology in college as well. I was department fellow in anatomy and physiology. And so I was going to interview this guy about deer populations in Arizona and how they managed the deer population from the Game and Fish Department.
Wild stuff.
I go into his office, and he comes in, and I remember he looked a little strange when he first came in, but I had a tape recorder, had a cassette tape. Not everybody knows what that is anymore. And we had a good interview. I was prepared. I knew what I was doing. And then when it was over, I started putting my stuff together and realized I was sitting behind his desk. That it was so messy that I had assumed that was the guest chair.
Right.
And the reason he was looking at me strangely is I was sitting behind his desk, and I was mortified. I was absolutely mortified.
That's pretty good, though.
But he sort of said, well, probably means I need to clean my desk up.
I need to clean my desk up. All right, there we go. That was 10 fresh questions by Dr. James White.
See, this is what I'm lacking on the dividing line. I have no musical segues. I don't have, any, and I am very good friends with John Cooper. Can you imagine what
you guys could do together?
What?
Come on. I could totally imagine what you guys could put together for the DL with John Cooper.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the guitarist Seth, have you ever seen him play? I mean, he could put some cool stuff, but instead, I focus on content. So what can I say?
That's how I
won't say what that might mean about anyone else, but
that's how I distract people from my lack of knowledge. Just songs and intros. That way they don't focus on. But that's why we have guys like you on. So let's give us the final word as we wrap this up. Tell us what you're working on, where people can find you. We'll link it all up, obviously, when it goes to YouTube and live stream and the podcast. But let the people know what you're working on, how they can get a hold of you.
Well, aomin.org, the dividing line is, that's how we communicate with folks. And like I said, I've got a major trip coming up. Going to be gone pretty much all of February. Going to be out with Jeffrey Rice in Tullahoma, Tennessee at his conference out there that he's doing on street preaching. I'm going to be doing a debate while there. Like I said, debating in Houston on February 8th on the subject of marriage, which I think people find really interesting. I'm going to be speaking down in Louisiana the next weekend on the subject of Roman Catholicism. So lots and lots of stuff there. And then more trips. There's the big Theonomy and Postmillennialism conference in Texas in May. Lots and lots of stuff going on.
That's with Joel, correct?
Yes.
And then you actually have one coming up in February with a good friend of mine, Claude Ramsey, is speaking with you I believe it's in Tennessee in February, and I'm gonna try to make it
Right.
to that one.
That's Tullahoma, Tennessee. Right.
Is that Tennessee? Yeah, the one you just said. Okay. So
Right.
be watching out for that. He's Here I Stand Theology, good friend of ours, and absolutely love him as a brother in the Lord too. There we go. There we have it. Dr. James White, thank you so much for coming on, being gracious with your time, letting us bring you down to our level here on the Dead Men Walking podcast. We do like that. We have to keep it real here. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode. We appreciate you checking out dmwpodcast.com. And of course, look for those links when they come out to everything Dr. James White. So you can click on that and take part in it. Dr. James, thank you.
Thank you for having me. God bless.
As always, guys, God bless. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Dead Men Walking Podcast for full video podcast episodes and clips, or email us at deadmenwalkingpodcast@gmail.com.
None of your